I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Today, I've got just a little bit more information for those of you who watched my video about telemetry and how to wire up telemetry, and you think you've done everything right, and it's still not freaking working. Well, if you've got an F4 flight controller, there may be a couple more hoops you have to jump through, and I'm going to tell you about how to do that. Stay tuned. In my previous video about how to wire up telemetry, I gave you the steps that most people will need to get telemetry working. But if you've got an F4 flight controller, there may be a few more hoops you have to jump through. What I said in that first video was you just wire up SmartPort to the SmartPort pad on your flight controller. And that's not entirely true. Some flight controllers don't have a SmartPort pad at all, and I'm going to show you a workaround for that. And other F4 flight controllers require you to put in a couple of command line options to get it working, and I'm going to show you about that. So let's get the command line options out of the way first, because that's the simplest thing. For the command line options, the best advice I can give you is to look at the documentation for your flight controller, and the vendor should tell you if it's needed. So here we're looking at the documentation for the Flying Lemon Kiwi V2, and you can see right here, it's telling you need to input set telemetry inversion off and set SmartPort half duplex off. These are the two command line options that you need to input in order to make telemetry work on this board. Even if you do everything else right, it won't work unless you input these commands. So here in Betaflight, I can type set telemetry inversion equals off, set sport half duplex equals off, and then I would type save, and that would enter those correctly. Now, it may be the case that your flight controller simply doesn't have a way to get SmartPort telemetry working. For example, it may not have a SmartPort pad with an inverter on it. Or it may have one inverted UART that you're using for your serial receiver for S-Bus. And what if you also want to do SmartPort? Well, there's no inverter. If that's the case, then the ultimate workaround, and this always works, is to get at the uninverted SmartPort signal from your receiver. So the way it works is your receiver outputs the S-Bus and the SmartPort signal from wherever it generates them, and it runs them through an inverter to make them be inverted. And then on your flight controller, you have to run them back through an inverter again to undo it. Well, why don't we just skip the whole process? And the way you do that is you have to find out where on the receiver to solder a wire to get at the uninverted signal before it goes through the inverter. And rather than me tell you how to do that, I'm going to refer you to a video from none other than Project Blue Falcon. I won't, just go ahead and watch his video, and he'll help us out even now that he's gone. Basically, you solder a wire where he shows you how to solder the wire, and then you just solder the wire to any available UART. For telemetry, it would be a TX pad, and it'll work because now the signal's not inverted. We've bypassed this whole inversion issue. There's another approach to getting SmartPort working on an F4 that I think ought to work, but I can't verify that it works. And I'm going to tell you about it so those of you who are maybe more industrious can explore it. And that approach would be to run SmartPort on a soft serial pin. You might need to use resource remapping to assign soft serial to one of your available pins, since many F4 boards don't break out soft serial to their own pin headers by default. It used to be the case that you couldn't run SmartPort telemetry on soft serial because it's too fast, and the F3 and the F1 processors couldn't do it. But I think I remember hearing a rumor that F4 boards could do it, but I've been trying for the last half hour on various flight controllers to get it to work, and they just won't do it. And I kind of wonder whether there's a restriction that you simply aren't allowed to use SmartPort on a soft serial port at all. And if that's the case, we're out of luck. You go ahead and explore that if you want to, though, and maybe one of you can get it working. I haven't been able to. That's going to do it for this video, and I hope now you have the information you need to get SmartPort working on all of your boards regardless. At the end of the day, the nuclear option is to solder to your receiver to get the uninverted output, and then it'll just work on any spare UART that you have. I showed you instructions from Project Blue Falcon on how to do it with an XSR and an X4R SB. If you have an XM Plus receiver, no, XM Plus doesn't support telemetry at all, so never mind about that. You're out of luck. Sorry.